What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to another episode on the Climb the Pocket YouTube page. Today, we have the top 20 wide receiver rankings. Perfect timing because we just had a blockbuster trade. Not crazy blockbuster, but Julio Jones is going to the Titans, so we're going to talk all about that and where he falls in our rankings. My co-host, as always, Ryan McGinley. Find him on Twitter at Bootleg Fantasy. Find me at Steve_CTP. Ryan, what's going on, man?
Well, Steve, I ran out of retro hats, but because we're talking wide receivers, I broke out a nice retro LSU sweatshirt. It's like 95 degrees here, but I had to keep up the theme that I was doing so far. I'm excited to talk wide receivers because I feel like this year, wide receivers is probably the most contentious group of the bunch. Like I think we know generally like the running backs kind of where they slot. Quarterbacks, we kind of have a feeling, but wide receivers, everyone has an opinion on them, and I feel like this is where the hay is made. I'm a big fan of the group of wide receivers, and it really allows you to go early running back this year. I think wide receivers are a lot deeper than they've been in years past, but I might say that every single year, so I guess we just have to kind of dive into our top 20 here.
Yeah, I think everyone says every year that
Yeah.
every position except for wide receiver, they can wait out or they got to go get early because there's so much wide receiver depth. And this year the top 20 is just stacked. Like there's so many of these guys like that fall in between like 10 and 20 and whatnot that I'd be happy just as my wide receiver one. If I can get two of them, I'd be great. Like I don't really see myself taking one of these, high end wide receivers in the first round. I'm going to go get the running back and I'm going to probably grab whatever wide receivers there in the second round or take another running back and get one of these guys in the third. So before we get into it, though, if you're not a subscriber already, we really appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel. Like the video. It helps us out. As always, drop a comment below of who you agree with, in our rankings and whatnot. What are your wide receiver rankings? But let's go and get into the top 20. Starting off at number 1, we both have Davante Adams. So I think we both can assume that we're assuming Aaron Rodgers is going to play. There's no point in slotting him down. People will do it in the rankings. They'll rank him like 7. Or 8, and just to like factor in the risk, but it really doesn't make any sense because they're kind of just like trying to add some sort of risk factor to it. Like how far does he go down if Aaron Rodgers might play, doesn't play? I'm just gonna assume he's playing until I hear otherwise. And if he is, Davante Adams, the wide receiver 1, he gets an insane amount of targets in the red zone. I can see that continue to happen. He's gonna score a lot of touchdowns. He's going to be a 1,200-yard receiver. That's a slam dunk, and he's a guy I could justify taking in the first round, probably somewhere around pick 6 or 7 even, especially in a PPR league. We kind of have these guys flip-flop at 2 and 3, but I have Tyreek Hill, then Stephon Diggs. You have Diggs, then Tyreek Hill. Both kind of different players. Tyreek Hill, you're going to be, he's going to end up being a top 5 wide receiver, maybe top 3, 2 as I have him. But he's not going to get there on like super consistent basis. There's going to be certain games where he is 4 for 61, but he's going to have those boom games. He's probably got the most upside out of any wide receiver in the league. He's going to have the biggest game possible with Patrick Mahomes throwing it. We saw the game last year where he had like 300 yards and 3 touchdowns or something. That was just insane. But hey, tell me why you got Diggs ahead of him, though. Diggs had a fantastic season with Josh Allen last year.
Yeah, I mean, Diggs led the league in targets. And as I go into these two guys, I want to touch on it that it really comes down to what you look for in your fantasy team. With Tyreek Hill, like you touched on, he's a big boom guy, where Stephon Diggs just feels like he's a safer pick. And I mean, he did lead the league in targets. And he has an actual wide receiver 2 with him this season in Emmanuel Sanders. It's kind of been under the radar that Sanders signed in Buffalo. But I mean, I really do think that signing is big for Diggs. And any tools of the trade that Sanders can teach Diggs for him to get better in this offseason is huge. I mean, I really do like Diggs learning from Emmanuel Sanders because, they do have similar route trees, and I really think that it's going to be big. Plus, we have a Gabby Davis breakout season, and that's always big. And Josh Allen gets another year under his belt. He gets another offseason with Diggs. And, I mean, that was probably my favorite pass-catch combo last year. They were just unbelievable to watch. But if you take Tyreek Hill, I'm not gonna slander you. I mean, it was his second most targets in his career last year, and it was his most targets per game. I mean, it was his most touchdowns. No more Sammy Watkins, so that you don't have to, be afraid that Sammy Watkins is taking targets from Tyreek Hill. And he did lead the league in yards per touch last year. It's the second time he's done that. And he will probably do it again this year. I mean, he's the most explosive guy in the game right now with the quarterback who's got one of, if not the biggest arms. So I really do like both of these guys. I tend to be safer in the first round, or probably the second round. Somewhere in the back end of the first, beginning of the second is where you're getting these guys. And I just go Diggs just because he feels safer on a week-to-week basis.
Yeah, I've explored other industry rankings, and some people have, like, obviously we'll talk about Calvin Ridley and whatnot, but, he's getting thrown up in there. A.J. Brown I've seen ranked even higher than some of these guys. I feel really solid about the guys we have ranked 1 through 3. I think those are the big dogs. And Stephon Diggs rounds it out, I think, or you have Met too, but that's like a clear tier break for me. I have Diggs and Hopkins pretty close, and I consider him closer. I just think Stephon Diggs he's going to be more safe to like get you 7 catches a game, and that's going to be solid. And that's what you were talking about, the consistency. What kind of player do you want? I don't see him getting less than 6 catches in a game. Like, I just don't. I think he's just going to have a lot of catches. Great for PPR, slam dunk. We'll get into Calvin Ridley kind of a little bit. Julio Jones is gone out of Atlanta. Calvin Ridley, there's a lot of talk going around the industry. Where do we put Calvin Ridley? What does this do to his value? You've seen all the stats of the games that Calvin Ridley played without Julio on the field, and it looks great. It definitely looks great. There's a little something behind the scenes there, and I'm not trying to say anything bad about Calvin Ridley. I have him ranked number 4. A lot of these games where Calvin Ridley played and Julio Jones didn't, I'm pretty sure Julio Jones was like on the questionable list, game time decision. Yeah. The other team can't necessarily plan 100% to not have Julio Jones there. And you see Calvin Ridley get off to a hot start in the first half where he's got 4 or 5 catches for over 100 yards already. And then he kind of calms down in the second half. And that might be a product of that. Teams adjusting at halftime because of Julio Jones going to play. Then he ends up not playing. They have to adjust. So I think there will be a learning curve as far as Calvin Ridley's going to be the number 1 receiver now, and he's going to have to face those number 1 cornerbacks more often. But I think he's really good. I think he's good enough to take on those challenges. He was probably one of the best receivers in double coverage last year, so I don't see why he can't continue to be good in that situation and against number 1 cornerback. So yeah. I just think his ceiling is really high. Matt Ryan's going to sling the ball. Atlanta Falcons are going to throw the ball a lot. So I like Calvin Ridley here for it. He seems really safe to me as well.
I got 2 nuggets on Calvin Ridley that are at least interesting to let you think more about him. He was 3rd in the league in red zone targets last year. I don't know if that's a product of having Julio Jones on the other side of you, but those are big numbers. And now that he's the number 1, does he see more eyes? Do those numbers go up? Do those numbers go down? It's going to be very interesting to see how his targets will look in the red zone. And for some odd reason, Julio Jones was terrible in the red zone at like 6'6". I never understood why Julio Jones couldn't score touchdowns. He just couldn't. But Calvin Ridley seemed to be able to answer that bell. And he also led the league in yards before the catch, right? So it's interesting to hear Julio Jones ask for a quarterback that can throw the deep ball when the guy on the other side of him led the league in yards before the catch. I mean, that's air yards. It's interesting to see Matt Ryan work with Calvin Ridley because I didn't really think of him as that type of guy. But, the more I go in on Calvin Ridley, the more I like him, but I still can't bump him above the top 3.
Yeah, every time I was playing Calvin Ridley in a fantasy matchup, I swear he'd have like a 50-yard bomb in the first drive, a couple different games. And that's the type of player he's been. That's kind of the adjusting I was talking about for teams, maybe planning for Julio, and they give up one of those big plays to Calvin Ridley, and he's just turning into a real shifty deep threat and whatnot. So I love Calvin Ridley, red zone monster, kind of low-key. Go ahead and move on. My number 5, I have Hopkins, then Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, Mr. Disrespected, Keenan Allen. I have A.J. Brown down at 9. You have him up at 5. Obviously, also, in this whole Julio trade because he does go to the Titans. A lot of people were projecting A.J. Brown to be a much higher draft pick this year, especially in Dynasty. He's going to like a wide receiver 2, maybe even the 1 in a lot of leagues. And then Julio comes in. Explain to me why this is a good thing because you clearly got him at 5 still.
So, to me, technically, it's a bad thing that Julio, for fantasy, I wanted to put him at 4, and he was probably my 4 before the Julio trade because everyone talks about the vacated targets, and they lost Jonnu Smith, they lost Corey Davis. Josh Reynolds was the guy opposite of him. He would have been a cheeky, fun flex play in some weeks. But A.J. Brown was going to see 1 billion targets, and that was the only way that they were going to be able to manufacture anything offensively through the air. Obviously, they've got Derrick Henry, so offense wouldn't have been that big of an issue, but having Julio Jones across from him, it helps him efficiency wise. It doesn't help him in the Devontae Adams scorebook where he gets peppered 40 times in a game. Like I do really like AJ Brown. The Titans had 126 passer rating when targeting AJ Brown. Like obviously he's a freak of nature. I mean, he had the second most broken tackles as a wide receiver behind DeAndre Hopkins. So when he gets the ball, good things happen, and it's going to be scary if he gets to see a couple one-on-one coverages because he's a man. I mean, the worst thing that's ever happened to that guy was he was the other guy in the picture with DK Metcalf. If he took that picture by himself, AJ Brown would have skyrocketed up draft boards. I really do think that this is his year. I mean, he's shown that he can be a number one. Like ESPN, I was watching, I think it was Steve Levy, and he said that the Titans haven't had a number one wide receiver, so it's great that they traded for Julio Jones. And I've never been so angry at ESPN.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that AJ Brown is getting the recognition that he deserves. I mean, his rookie year was unbelievable, and he was banged up a bit in the early parts of last year, and he probably, I think correctly, he was supposed to get surgery and he opted not for it. So I'm excited to see what he does this year. I mean, he gets his idol, and I mean, that offense is like the most efficient offense in football. Everyone wants to talk about it being the Seahawks, but I really do think that the Titans are unbelievable.
They have the best wide receiver duo in the league?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, worst case scenario is they're at least benching the most weight at wide receiver.
Definitely. Love that. Love Julio to the Titans. Love A.J. Brown. After A.J. Brown, you have DeAndre Hopkins, Justin Jefferson, DK Metcalf, then Keenan Allen at 9. And you have Allen Robinson down there. Let's, real quick, before we move on to the back 10, talk about Keenan Allen. I think he's getting a little more respect than he's gotten in years. I think people are excited about Justin Herbert and whatnot. But what's this guy's upside? Like, is his upside like inside the top 5, or is his ceiling the 5th receiver and whatnot? Because there's guys like these guys like DK Metcalf, Justin Jefferson, AJ Brown. They seem like they have so much more like home run hitting potential, and Keenan Allen he almost seems like more of a Stephon Diggs guy, but like not as deep. Like does Keenan Allen not have that deep threat ability that pushes him up in like the ceiling?
I think the issue with Keenan Allen has been that he's no longer like the fun new toy, and when he was hurt, right? And people kind of were scorned by Keenan Allen early on in his career, and he's still only like 28 or something like that. He looks older, and it feels like he's been in the league for 30 years because I think he was like the youngest guy drafted in his draft. So like he's been in the league a long time. He's not flashy, but if you get him in a PPR league as your wide receiver too, you hit a gold mine because he gets peppered. He always has gotten peppered with targets. He's got great hands. And he's one of the best route runners in the NFL. Like behind Stephon Diggs, it's tough to say that there's guys better than him. Like I really do love Keenan Allen's route running ability. And the fact that Hunter Henry's gone, I feel like they're going to have to lean on Keenan Allen more in the middle of the field, more than they usually do. So he's only going to continue to see more targets. It's going to be interesting to see kind of just how they use the rest of those guys. Like they've got the guys that filled in when Mike Williams was hurt every other week last year. Like not Tyrell Williams, all the other guys that kind of had bland last names. Like they had Johnson, I forget who it was. But like they had just like bland name dudes filling in for Mike Williams, and like Mike Williams needs to figure it out too. But while we're on that topic, I'm sick of picking up Mike Williams every single week.
Jalen Guyton.
Jalen Guyton was a good one too. I mean, if your name's Jalen, you got to be pretty good at wide receiver. I mean, Jalen Reagor, of course. I mean, obviously, but yeah, I really do think that the Chargers have an underrated offense. For some reason, Justin Herbert's getting drafted at like quarterback 8. I mean, I don't know what he showed last year that would say that he should not be like a bona fide top 5 quarterback. But, I just keep sleeping on the Chargers. I know that they've played at a soccer field, and I really do think that Keenan Allen's big time.
This could be a big year for him. It really could. And I think if this isn't a big year for him, then we kind of step back a little bit for every year after that. Because I think Justin Herbert's going to have a huge breakout year. And if he doesn't, Keenan Allen will be a part of that. So I have Terry McLaurin at number 10. You have Terry McLaurin at 12. A lot of talk
Yeah.
going on. I love the pictures the Washington football team posted today with Fitzpatrick and McLaurin and those signs and whatnot. Kind of looked like some sort of baby shower or baby announcement or whatnot. And there was a lot of fun photo edits and whatnot. But Terry McLaurin, this is a guy, you got ranked at 12. I have him at 10. Realistically, in this department, the difference between even 18 and 12 and whatnot is not that much. So we pretty much have him ranked equally. Terry McLaurin could be a really, really good wide receiver this year in fantasy. Like, really, really good. Has he ever had a passer like Fitzpatrick? And I think the fantasy community itself talks about, I know, but I'm saying the fantasy community talks about Fitzpatrick like he's just like a gunslinging best quarterback like he could ever play with and whatnot. And I don't disagree. Like, the last couple of years for Fitzpatrick, whatever team he's gone to, he's just been slinging it. Guy doesn't give a hell. He's just throwing the ball. He was great on the Bucs. He was good on the Dolphins. Remember when he was on the Bucs? Like, that was a fun offense to watch. 100%. And I think the Washington football team is going to be a good team this year. And Terry McLaurin is by far, I think he's the best wide receiver on that team. I think Curtis Samuel is very sneaky this year. And I think I heard some talks that they're going to implement him in a big way this year. But I think Terry McLaurin has some game-breaking speed, some game-breaking play-making ability. So I'm really excited to watch Terry McLaurin, the OSU product, playing with his old OSU bro. Man, I'm excited to watch that. How big are you on Terry McLaurin here?
I mean, it gets to a point where you're ranking these guys, and we're a pro Terry podcast. We've been as such.
He's been our guy since the beginning.
He's always like, so if somebody's new here and thinks that I'm a Terry McLaurin slanderer, that's just not the case. Just go back a couple videos. I'm sure I talked up Terry, but I don't know, man. Like, the guys in front of him, it's tough to like. I know Michael Thomas has a weird situation, but it's tough to put him above Michael Thomas at 11. I want to. It's because the Washington football team offense is going to be built to be a passing offense. Antonio Gibson isn't going to be like a 30 carry a game guy, and they're talking about his passing work. And I love Antonio Gibson. He's not a between the tackles guy. And they brought in Curtis Samuel, who was a fun little bubble screen guy that they used instead of having to run the ball with Mike Davis while Christian McCaffrey was hurt. I do think the offense is set for Ryan Fitzpatrick to throw the ball 30 to 40 times. And, that comes with good and that comes with bad. So it'll be interesting to see week to week what Fitzpatrick you get. You may get like holster both guns in his sides, Ryan Fitzpatrick, or you're going to get a terrible Ryan Fitzpatrick.
That's true.
It happens, It's okay. I don't like the optics of like the guys behind him, like Taylor Heineke, like fun little story, I guess. I don't know. I think that if Washington had like an actual quarterback besides Fitzpatrick, they're probably NFC contenders. Like their team's good. They've got a good team, which playing in a bad division, they might not have to throw as much as you expect them to. So I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see how Terry does. I love his skill set. I'd love for him to get paired with one of these young quarterbacks, but it'll be a fun little 2021 with Ryan Fitzpatrick under helm.
I guess if you think about it, it's like similar play style to like, he's not Tyreek Hill, but he's got like that game-breaking ability, deep threat, but he doesn't have Patrick Mahomes, and he's not as fast as Tyreek Hill or as good. So he's like kind of, and then by comparing those two, he's going to have games where he's not good. He's not going to produce for you in fantasy. So that's certainly a risk you have to factor in. I guess my ranking reflects the upside and the hope that he's going to really find something. They're going to develop a real connection. There's been good news coming out that they have that. I love coach talk and news out of training camp. It's my favorite because it is. I believe everything that is said and immediately change my opinion on anything I hear. So I heard that Fitzpatrick and Terry McLaurin are linking up. Their chemistry's growing. Automatically in my top 10. That's what happened. Let's go ahead and move on. I have Alvin Robinson at 11. You have him up there at 10, I believe. Michael Thomas, flip-flop, 12 and 11. Mike Evans, we have similarly ranked. It's getting really hard to rank Mike Evans and Chris Godwin this year, except for knowing that they're probably really close to each other in the rankings. I see you have Mike Evans a little higher. I did I do kind of agree with that. I have him higher, only one spot. I just like the connection I saw with Tom Brady. I feel like they had a little more chemistry going. And Tom Brady found Mike Evans deep a lot on the sideline. I really like that. So I think they continue to develop a little more. I feel like they get each other more. I haven't seen any interviews of them talking together, being friends out at the club, out at the house, barbecue, playing bags, none of that. But it looks like they have a little better chemistry than Chris Godwin. Chris Godwin fought injuries last year. I think that's something we're going to have to monitor. I feel like Chris Godwin has dealt with injuries the last couple of seasons, and something you might want to monitor throughout. So, I mean, Mike Evans is no spring chicken either. He's definitely had some injuries himself, but I like his upside just a little bit more. I have Adam Thielen ranked 16. He did not find your top 20. You are obviously assuming there's going to be some pretty big regression in the touchdown department. I think he had 14 last year. It's pretty crazy. But I still feel like he's Kirk's go-to guy. Justin Jefferson is great, no doubt great, and I feel like they each have different roles. I just feel like Adam Thielen I feel like he's a lock for 8 or 9 touchdowns again, like a lock. He just does something magical in the red zone, and Kirk finds him. And Justin Jefferson's great, but how much better can Justin Jefferson be than he was last year, which is crazy. Besides a few more touchdowns, maybe. Guy had over 1,400 yards. I mean,
so here's my thing with these two, right? Adam Thielen almost doubled Justin Jefferson's targets in the red zone. I hate that. Like it was. I think it was 19 to only 10 for Justin Jefferson. And I understand how effective Adam Thielen is down there, but at some point it's going to start to turn the other way, and once it does, it will be firmly Justin Jefferson. So here's a tweet from Frank Amarante at F Amarante TFJ. From week 6 to 17, Justin Jefferson out-targeted Adam Thielen 100 to 64. I think once he gained the trust of Kirk Cousins that Adam Thielen already had, it became Justin Jefferson wide receiver 1. And that's not a real dig at Adam Thielen. I think he's been a very good wide receiver the last couple of years, and he's been Kirk Cousins' guy, which I'm not sure is like a woo, like congrats, you're Kirk Cousins' guy, but he's been effective with Kirk, and he'll be the red zone guy because they also lost Kyle Rudolph. But ultimately, I don't want to bank on Adam Thielen scoring touchdowns for him to be a top 20 guy. If you get him as your wide receiver 3, amazing. That's great. He feels safer there to me than if you draft, I don't know, if you get like Chris Godwin and DK Metcalf, you feel better than DK Metcalf and Adam Thielen to me. That's just how I feel. I do think that Thielen has an every week start feel to him, but I don't know, man. These young guys that are coming in feel safer to me. Like I don't know. I like Thielen. I don't love Thielen this year.
So predict Thielen's stat line this year on the spot, like just real.
Dude, if I'm being honest, it's going to be tough for him to go over 1,100 yards, right? And touchdowns are so ridiculous. Like he'll still be probably a 10 touchdown guy, but like
so you're saying 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns? Isn't he a top 20 guy?
I mean,
I guess it depends how many catches he has.
Yeah, it comes down to catches, but to me, like, I don't know, man. I feel safer with the guys that are next up in the list because also Adam Thielen's like 31, 32.
Hey,
so
proud dynasty holder.
Yeah. See, that's the issue, Steve.
It's rough.
That's the number one.
I just gotta reap it. I can maybe dump him in a trade later, but I'm gonna see what happens.
Yeah, when he scores a touchdown or two in week 1, just like trade him for DJ Moore, and you're good.
He's also on my team.
Your team's great then. You're
fine. All right, let's go ahead and talk about Mr. Julio Jones. We touched on him earlier. This is gonna be a tough one, guys. It was tough before he got traded, and it's tough now. Julio Jones goes to the Titans. We were projecting all these targets for A.J. Brown. Now Julio comes in. I think it's going to be a great fit. I think Ryan Tannehill is going to love Julio. I think Julio is going to love Ryan Tannehill. I think Julio is kind of underestimating what he did have with Matt Ryan. I think something came out saying, he's glad to have a quarterback that can throw the ball deep now. Seems kind of odd. Pretty sure they threw the ball a lot there in Atlanta, and Julio Jones was a deep threat on that team. Maybe he just wasn't on the field enough. I don't know. But what's his upside in the Tennessee Titans offense? I feel like I like this offense a lot more than I liked like Julio's situation in Atlanta. It seemed like there was so much more opportunity. Now they have Derrick Henry, who's one of the best running backs in the league, and clearly their go-to game plan is to give him the ball and then hit A.J. Brown, or at least it was last year, on the play action and whatnot. Julio Jones gets thrown in there, going to see a lot of targets, going to see those vacated targets that Corey Davis left. He's going to scoop probably all those up. Jonnu Smith left. Ferguson will get some of those, but those are going to be dispersed between A.J. Brown and Julio Jones. But it's just really hard to figure out what Julio Jones is going to be unless he becomes like a red zone guy, which he hasn't been. And maybe that was an Atlanta thing. His frame shows that he should be a red zone guy, but he's not. I feel like Julio Jones is what we want A.J. Brown to be. So this is where I'm kind of confused.
I think my thing with the Titans is I love their offense on paper now, but I don't love Julio Jones for fantasy. Like I still love A.J. Brown for fantasy, and I still love Derrick Henry for fantasy, but Julio feels like the guy that slips in fantasy drafts, and then people are still going to kind of get him at a value. Like I know I've got him ranked at 15. No, I got him at 14. I've got him at 14. I think that he finishes somewhere around wide receiver 14, but I don't know if he gets taken around wide receiver 14. I don't know. I feel like their offense is an efficient one, but they're not throwing the ball 40 times a game like the Falcons did in a dome where Julio's the by far and away wide receiver one on the team. So it's going to be interesting to see like when Tannehill only throws 25 times a game, what does that mean for Julio Jones? And to me, it's not as good as when Matt Ryan was throwing 40 times. So I like Julio. He's not a wide receiver one anymore, which sucks because Julio is one of the greatest of all time. He still has 3 or 4 solid to great years left. And then, I don't know, I want him to be great. I think the fit is better for football than it is for fantasy, though.
Yeah, definitely. It's going to be interesting. I think he's a guy that in home leagues with a little less experienced fantasy football players, not experience, maybe knowledge, like in the industry and whatnot, NFL, fantasy, all of that. He's going to get taken in probably wide receiver 14, maybe a little even earlier. People are going to get excited that he's on a new team. He's on the Titans. It's going to be a fun offense. But in industry leagues, in drafts, and with a little more skilled fantasy player group, I think he'll probably go a little beyond the 14, probably around somewhere where I have him drafted or ranked. I could see him going ahead Adam Thielen for sure, but probably right there by Chris Godwin and Mike Evans. It's probably the perfect spot for Julio in drafts. So that'll definitely be interesting to watch. Some guys that I have in my top 20 that you don't have: Tyler Lockett, Deontay Johnson. You have DJ Moore and CeeDee Lamb, and also Cooper Kupp. Do you think CeeDee Lamb? Let's just end this with a couple minutes of random questions. Do you think CeeDee Lamb could be a wide receiver one on your team? Like, would you be comfortable with him as your wide receiver one?
As your own wide receiver one?
Assuming you probably went like running back, maybe got a tight end, like something, and then he's your wide receiver one. So you obviously have other good talent on your team, and he's your wide receiver one. You feel comfortable?
I think if you construct your roster that way, you probably got 2 pretty reliable guys at minimum. So I think that he is one of those super high ceilings and his floor is not too bad. So like if he takes the step and jumps Amari Cooper like I expect him to this year, I think that you are getting close to wide receiver one numbers. And on top of that, there's going to be games where he probably wins you your week if Dak Prescott comes out looking healthy. It really is all predicated on if Dak is healthy. And I as a fan of the Philadelphia Eagles, like everybody knows, I do want Dak to be healthy. I really want Dak to look like he was last year. I mean, he looked like an MVP candidate. And if you've got the wide receiver 1 or the 1A or the 1B of an MVP candidate who's throwing for 5,000 yards in a dome, whose run game isn't that great, sorry, Zeke, you're going to get numbers. And I think that CD Lamb is going to put up those numbers. I mean, he was the best wide receiver coming out of college last year. Like, let's not get it twisted now. Like, he was the guy, and then all of a sudden they had Ben DiNucci at quarterback, and that's tough for a rookie. It's tough for anybody, let alone a rookie. So I really do think CeeDee Lamb takes a step, and it's going to be astronomical. I mean, he could be a 1,200-yard guy, no problem this year.
Yeah. Let me just end this episode with a statement that Robert Woods and Cooper Kupp, they're back. They're back. They're back on the Rams. A couple years ago, they were fantastic with Jared Goff. Everyone was drafting them high. They're back. Matty Stafford's in town. He's going to love that combination. But, hey, that's our top 20 wide receivers. Ryan, it was a good time talking to you today. We're going to update these rankings throughout the summer. Probably in 4 weeks or so, we'll have another wide receiver rankings. Look out for another Climb the Pocket draft advice, summer video next week. Subscribe to the channel if you're new and you enjoyed today's content. We appreciate that. Drop a comment, like the video. Most important thing, please like the video. It really helps us out. But until next week, we hope you come back. See you later.